Hello, 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 and welcome again to another episode of the Cripple Connection Podcast, the third episode, mind you. And I am so pumped for today's episode because we're going to be talking about everything Final Fantasy VII and the madness surrounding the ending and the craziness of the story.
Yes.
We are super pumped to be here today. I'm joined by my partner in crime, as always, Jeffrey Redmond. Jeffrey, what's up, brother?
Hey, Cody, how you doing, man? This is gonna be, I think, one of our best ones.
I think you and
I'm
I are
so
so
excited.
pumped. We're so pumped because you and I have great conversations about video games, which is what
Yes,
prompted us to even do this podcast.
exactly.
But we have not talked at all about the ending of Final Fantasy VII and the game, and we have specifically saved it for this show, so
Mhm.
that way you and I can muse and gush and talk about all the bullshit that comes along with it. If you're
Exactly.
watching this on YouTube, hit the like button. That helps our podcast to grow and be seen by more people. If you're a fan of the content, hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that way you can be notified whenever we go live. Jeffrey, let's get some housekeeping out the way so
Yeah,
that way you and I can just jump on to the talk.
definitely.
Last of Us 2 has a brand new release date, which I actually don't have in front of me. Do you know it off the
It is June 19th.
June 19th?
Mm-hmm.
But that has been marred by the fact that a ton of leaks from the story have been leaked online.
Yeah.
Even in looking up some of this, I've already seen some of the spoilers just floating around Twitter. And this has come after the game was delayed for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a rough patch for Naughty Dog.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to, at least mention this in passing, because it kind of shows you the world that we're living in now. That a company, an esteemed company like Naughty Dog, could put so much time and effort and work into something, for it just to be ruined in a matter of no time. And all this is online. I just read an article that the director is heartbroken by this.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, this is kind of dare I say, for a bad pun, uncharted
Yeah.
territory that
Indeed.
we're
Um,
kind of in right now. But this also happens with TV shows, and
well,
Game of
yeah,
Thrones had a
and
lot
that,
of that too.
yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Is this is the age of the internet, and chances are something is gonna get leaked along the way. I think the big question to ask is, do spoilers matter? Now, I know for a story based game like this, a lot of people are going to say yes. But
Right.
if the gameplay is tight enough, even if you know every beat of the story, if you enjoy the game itself, you're going to enjoy the overall experience. So I think it's a matter of that, but I also think it's a matter of where these leaks came from. And we're getting, uh, many different stories. Some people say it's disgruntled employees, probably maybe because of coronavirus. Who
Well,
knows?
it kind of
That
has to
kind of
be,
thing.
right? I mean,
Uh,
who else would have that kind of access to the
right,
details of the story? I
right,
mean, especially after it was delayed. I mean, it kind of seems like it has to be someone from the inside, which
right.
probably makes it feel even worse.
Yeah, I'm sure
I
it
mean,
does.
especially if you're the higher ups at Naughty
It's
Dog.
betrayal.
Yeah,
It's betrayal.
100%.
So yeah, I definitely understand the way they feel, and that sucks. But like I said, it's the internet. Stuff gets leaked all
Yeah,
the time. You can download stuff for free half the time if you know how to do it, and circumvent buying a game entirely now if you know what you're doing. So I
yeah.
mean, it's just the dark part of the internet, and it's something that people just tend to take advantage of. I'm sad to see it happen because I love Naughty Dog and I love the stuff they put out. But it's just the age we live in, and
Yeah,
unfortunately,
it
that's
seems
part of it.
very much like a 2020 problem.
Very much
And
so. Yeah.
no matter what medium you're in, whether it be television, film, video games. I mean, this is the reality that you live in. I mean,
Right.
anyone can leak the details of the story, and then it's out there. And what you're gonna
Right.
do about it? I mean, you
Right.
can't do anything about it. So
You can.
yeah, it sucks for them. I feel sad for them, but at the same time, it doesn't take away my interest too much. I mean,
See,
even though
and
even though this, especially now, everyone's home, everyone's
yeah,
inside, and it's not like it's just a movie where
no,
the story is literally the
the
only
only thing, right?
reason that. Yeah, I mean, there is a whole game to be played. So
Yeah,
in my mind, it actually does help that this is a video game.
yeah, I think
Um,
so too. Yeah,
yeah, because it doesn't hinder your overall experience playing.
right,
Now there may be
exactly,
some now there may be some disappointment because you might know what happens because someone spoiled it for you. But
right.
I think if you have a meaningful experience with the game, you're gonna formulate your own opinion on it anyway. So
Definitely, yeah,
uh yeah, so um shout out to everyone at Naughty Dog. Sorry this
yeah.
happened.
It
Um,
sucks. Mm.
yeah, I mean, I would still encourage everyone to
Almost definitely.
play this. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, but it's about that time. It's about that space. It's about time that Final Fantasy VII Remake slap you in the face.
Yes, and it
Cause
will.
yeah, we have so much to talk about,
Indeed, we
and
do.
and so first off, full spoilers.
Yes,
If you are not
most
aware of
definitely.
the events of Final Fantasy VII or the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake, this is not the episode for you.
Mm-mm.
If
Click
you
away
don't want to
now.
be
Yep.
spoiled, leave the episode now. Come back at a later time, and hear our opinions and hear our thoughts. So wow,
Yeah,
Jeffrey, you beat this before I did.
I did.
So I'm going to kind of defer to you first.
Okay.
What was your overall impression of the game? Did you enjoy it? And I mean, just give me your overall kind of thoughts and feelings about Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Okay. God, where do I begin?
I know,
Um,
dude. There's so much to go through. I have so many different thoughts and opinions. I don't even know where to start. That's why I'm just throwing it up to you.
as far as the game goes, um,
Right.
it's actually one of the best action RPG systems I
Yeah,
think I have seen, because it
I agree
really
with you.
is one of the best combinations of action and turn-based I think you could possibly get. A lot of people claim that stuff like Kingdom Hearts is just mash X to win, with
Right.
no like strategy, no anything. But if you go in this game just mashing the square button, you're gonna get your ass kicked.
Yeah, you're gonna
So
get handled.
so I like,
I was surprised
yep,
especially towards the end of the game, even on
yeah,
normal,
yeah.
how hard it became.
Yeah, normal kicked my ass, and I'm scared to go back into hardcore mode because there's even worse stipulations there.
Yeah,
I haven't touched it yet, but I know all about it, and just the thought of that makes me like, oh, I don't think I
yeah,
could do it, but I'm gonna try. But yeah, the combat system is great. The graphics are great to a certain extent. I think the character models look absolutely fantastic when they work. But this
yeah.
game has a very big problem of loading textures, and I don't know if you
Yeah,
noticed that,
no, I
but
definitely noticed it.
but
It
oh
definitely,
my god, some of the environmental stuff looks terrible, even after the textures have popped in, because there's so much there, and they're trying to like literally go over to a random wall of any building of anything, and you will see how low res that shit is. Like
yeah,
they clearly didn't go, pixel by pixel and fix all this stuff. But, I don't expect them to, not with a
yeah.
game like this and with the scale that they're trying to do. Even though this is a very linear game, the environments are quite big at
Right.
times.
And I
And
kind of think that kind of is the problem because
yeah, it is.
in a game that isn't open world, you're
Right.
trying to make this gigantic experience and try and make Midgar come to life. So one of the things that inevitably ends up happening is that you have these long corridors that
Yeah,
kind of seem to go on forever
they
sometimes,
do.
and
They do.
yeah, they're just not gonna spend all that time and resource on textures for a wall or a pipe. I mean, yeah, there were some times that I did notice that um, as well. But listen,
Overall, I think it's great. Yeah.
I loved 95% of this game.
Yeah.
I love. I thought that the combat system, while it might not seem deep at first, once
Yep.
you delve into it and understand how material works in this game, and you understand the greater details of blocking and parrying. Like I changed it up later on, midway through the game, about until Wall Market. I kind of played it like a hack and slash and
Yep.
just kind of built up everything to just do as much damage as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you start actually incorporating the magic, and once you start actually delving into the details of the materia and what they do and how weapons will give you things, I enjoyed it so much. I had such a great time. And again, as I've said in the previous podcast, Final Fantasy VII was not that benchmark title for me. It's not
Mine either.
right. It's not the game that caused me to fall in love with Final Fantasy. But as someone who has played Final Fantasy VII, man, there were parts where I'm going through the game and I'm like, wow. Like I'm in Midgard right now. I'm playing Cloud. That's Barrett. The world is so fun when you walk around, and there isn't a moment where you have to read text to listen to someone.
No,
everyone has a voice.
Yeah,
everything has a voice, and I was so impressed by that, and it adds to the world, especially when the plate drops, and you have and you can move around.
And I mean,
and you hear people talking.
It was supposed to be, in the original game, but I think especially that part I found hit me the hardest. Now, you said about, everybody having a voice, but that doesn't always bode well for me. And I don't mean the main characters. All the main characters sound great. But, like, when you're doing a side quest and you're in a particular area, did you notice that there are always, like, groups of people? Like, small little groups of people. And as you go back and forth from them, you tend to hear the same dialogue between them over and over again. Well, that's because every group only has one line of dialogue.
Right.
So,
which is understandable.
You would end up going back and forth a lot, which could get annoying at times, but it's never anything that really, got on my nerves too bad. But
and I also felt like a lot of times how you just mentioned, there's a group of people kind of sitting right next to one another. So what ends up happening is they all kind of end up talking over each other.
Yeah,
and it kind of gets muddled a little bit. And there are times when even in the middle of a cutscene,
the main cutscene,
you can still hear people talking in the background. And
I didn't like that at all.
It didn't bother me to the point where I'm like, oh, I don't like this. But it was at least noticeable. But again, I'm not even going to count off of that, because overall I found it. It helped me to resonate with the characters in the world, which is so opposite of what Final Fantasy 15 did. The NPCs in that were just so terrible.
They were, the whole game in general wasn't that well put together. But that's a whole other situation.
Right. Which is, but I do feel like they did a great job of making this, steampunk style city feel like a real place that these people are in. This kind of capitalistic, hellhole where all the people, who have the haves and the have-nots. Yeah, and I feel like even in the original one, they did a good job of making the slums feel like, oh man, people live here. This is the reality of their lives. And I didn't know if that would translate well. And it did. I felt like it really did a good job of putting you in that world, in that environment. There was never a time where I felt like, oh man, this is pointless, or I felt aware that I was playing something. The whole time, I genuinely felt like I was discovering new parts of this real place with these characters that I do have a bit of an affection towards.
Right. And that's the other thing too, is the characterization. I mean, obviously, in a PlayStation 1 game, they're very limited with what they could do with the original. Even though a lot of people love these characters, here we got to see them shine. We got to see their facial expressions. We got to hear them, physically hear what they had to say, and I think it adds a lot more weight to Cloud, because I always found Cloud to be really damn annoying in the original one.
Yeah.
Like, he was just this hot-headed piece of shit, really. And
Yeah.
at first he comes off like that in this game, but you actually see him progress. Even in this small chunk of the game, you see him progress to a point where, okay, even though I don't know his full backstory yet, because they obviously haven't gotten there yet,
Right.
I still kind of understand this guy. He
Yeah.
ends up cracking a smile, I think, at one of Jesse's jokes, and there's
Yeah,
this
and by the
grin on his face.
yeah. So by the way, I feel Final Fantasy VII Remakes did that better than the original one,
Yeah,
because
that's what I'm saying.
Cloud's character development, it
It's
doesn't
much-
really come
yeah.
until after Midgar. So
Exactly.
you had to now put some of that into this
Into
game,
this.
and
they
I
did.
feel like that was even better, because anytime that you're able to spend more time with these characters and understand their idiosyncrasies and what makes them tick, it becomes an experience that you're not just playing, you feel like you're a part of it. And for a character that is stoic, very to himself, very much a grump, it did add some depth and some layers to Cloud that I feel like, if they would have followed all the story beats of the first one, then
it would have fallen.
Yeah, you really wouldn't have had that. Listen, we're gonna get into this ending here in a second,
God.
and I know that you and I have a ton of thoughts about this, but
We do.
The reason why I wanted to start on this is because I enjoyed this, man. I had
too.
fun. Like, I had a lot of fun, and I felt like they did such a good job of taking a game that people love and for the most part making it an incredible realized experience. I felt that the characters benefited so much from the voice acting and from more time having to do things. And there was I love Barrett more than
Barrett's
I ever
amazing.
have in my entire life.
See, and that's the thing, is Square Enix specifically has a very big problem portraying black people, and I don't want to get into a huge race thing, but
some people still don't like this interpretation.
And it makes sense though, because technically he's a Mr. T knockoff, but at least he's been done well this time. He's not like Zaz or whatever his name was from 13 with the giant afro and the gangster guns and the bullshit. Barrett is a family man. He loves his daughter, and one of the most crushing scenes, even though she's okay, is like when he thinks Marlene is dead. Yeah, and it's like, holy shit, man. So
Barrett by far has the most
awesome.
character. The most character growth, the most clear motivation, especially since you're not given the backstory on Cloud as much. I mean, even characters like Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, who were so much of a side note in the original Final Fantasy. Yeah, but now
she gets her whole side.
Right,
they are. Whole thing.
Yeah, they are realized characters, and I think it's such a good thing. That they were able to do this, and like I said, the combat is rich. Certain levels are better than others.
Oh,
definitely. So for example, when you're moving around Sector 7, there are a lot of long, narrow corridors that you end up traversing, and it's not until later that you get the fast travel with the chocobos. So,
oh God, that saves so much time.
It does, but man, when you don't have it.
Man, you feel it.
Yeah, you're just running through corridors, but then when you get to a place like Walmart,
oh God,
and
Walmart.
and the Shinra building, there are places where Square they flex their muscles.
They really
Like
did.
look at what we're capable
Mm.
of doing, and it felt, especially when you're in Wall Market at nighttime before you're going to the honeybee. It's like this
Oh, God,
almost
honeybee.
kind of like a Shibuya kind of Japan type of
Yeah,
vibe.
exactly. Yeah.
I loved it, man. The environment is so important to the
Yeah.
overall experience, and there were parts where I'm just like, man, this looks gorgeous. It feels gorgeous. I'm in it. I don't know what's around the corner. I want to explore and try and find treasure and material.
Mhm.
Yeah, there were parts that were just, from an environmental standpoint, that were just
Oh, yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. Even though I think Wall Market is a little cramped, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's hell trying to navigate on the mini map. Let me tell
No,
you,
it is.
Jesus. It is.
No, I did find that too.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, but it is probably one of the most best fleshed out places I have ever seen. You go just about anywhere, and there's, I mean, just I mean, and not, and I have to say, from a story beat as well, thank you to Square Enix for leaving pretty much everything intact, albeit
Yeah,
in a slightly different way. They kept Cloud with the cross dressing thing. You're
yeah,
doing, as much as I hated the pull ups and the shit, like, or the squats or whatever you had to do,
yeah,
they kept it in there. Um, it's very clear that they know what the fans wanted, and they kept all that original material in there. Like I said, albeit different ways, but it's really nice to see that they weren't, swayed by like political correctness and all the bullshit we have today. They
yeah,
were pretty faithful with the original. Um, I do feel in some cases that they were a little long in the tooth. For example, you go down to the sewers twice and
yes,
you learn about Leslie, who, I mean, who is this guy? I mean, like, really, like, he just came out of nowhere, and I understand he's got some kind of, loyalty to, what was his name? Andre, the guy that ran the
yeah,
Andre,
Andre, yeah,
Andre,
yeah.
or
I
whatever.
think it's
Um,
Andreas
but
or something.
Andreas or something like that, yeah. But it's like, who is this guy? I don't care. I mean,
Yeah,
there were certain points, like you had to fight the sewer monster twice. Like, why? Um, I think they could have. Actually, they probably could have cut that whole section. But so there are bits and pieces like that. Like, why am I back here? Why am I going back and forth between these areas? But at the same time, I understand that this is one city and they were trying to push a 40-hour game. Um, but that is one thing I noticed. Also, the side quests were bit. I
well,
mean,
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I felt that they were hit or miss. There
yeah,
was some that I really enjoyed doing. So I mean, anytime I was doing anything for the little Shinra kid, that does
yeah,
the material,
Chadley, yeah.
yeah, Chad, I like doing that stuff.
Well, you got
Uh,
summons out of that, so it was worth
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. You think of someone's out of that, but there were some side quests and side stories that like and I'm bad with names, but the old woman, she's like the angel of the night or something.
The Angel of the Slums,
Yeah,
yeah,
angel of the sun. I enjoyed that. I had fun
yeah,
with
that
that,
was
and I
cool.
and I, and I
That was
also felt
interesting.
that it added interesting insight to our characters as
I
well.
agree.
There were certain side quests that did a good job at expanding the world and the people in it. But
Right,
then there's other times when you're chasing fucking cats,
right.
and it's like, who gives a shit?
Or
And I
finding lost kids, and it's like,
right,
okay.
and I don't.
Um,
Again, it's another scenario where I don't take too much credit off of that because at the
right,
end of the day, it's not an open world title, and you do
right.
have to fill out this world with different things like that. So not everyone's going to be a banger,
I
but
agree. I agree.
but I do kind of forgive them a little. But yeah, for the most part, the side quests, you're doing it for a completion thing, pretty
Well,
much. I think.
that and most of the alternative weapons are hidden
Yeah,
behind that. So it's almost like, well, if you want to collect everything in the game, especially if you're hunting for that platinum trophy, these are things you have to do.
and by the way,
Um,
that's also not discredit the fact that that's always been a part of Final Fantasy. That
Almost
there's
definitely.
always gonna
Most
be shit that is
is
that
oh
that
shit,
you're gonna
there
have
is.
to
Yep.
Yeah, man, like in Final Fantasy X, doing all the chocobo racing and hitting balloons,
Oh
just
God, yeah,
terrible
I forgot
bullshit. That
about that.
yeah,
Yeah,
ultimately you had to do if you wanted to power up their ultimate weapon. So
yeah,
it's like,
that's true. Yeah,
yeah. So there's a lot of that. So in my opinion, that's a tried and true Final Fantasy thing.
I
And
agree. I
some of the
agree.
side quests just kind of suck.
Yeah.
Um, Jeffrey, is there anything positive you want to say? Because I feel like both of us, as we get into this ending, that's where our both of our tones are probably going to shift a little bit. Before we do that, is there anything else you want to mention that you enjoyed, or that you found fun, or that surprised you in
Uh,
a real big way? I want to just say this first. My favorite boss battle
yeah.
in the entire game, because of how hard it is, but how the action looked, was
Mhm.
Rufus. Dude,
Yes.
Rufus
Yes.
was
Rufus is
fucking
badass.
awesome. Rufus,
Yeah.
dude,
And
every time you hit him, he's like, nah, bitch, turns you away and just blasts the shit.
dash you with the gun. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my favorite. Um, and there were a few good ones. Like I think
Yeah.
Reno and Rude
Reno
were
and
great.
Rude were great. I loved fighting Rude and just how like
Yeah,
he picked you up and threw your ass. You know, like
yeah.
he didn't give a shit, man. I love that guy. But yeah, I did love that. I loved Rufus as well. I for a throwaway boss in the original, they actually did him justice, and I
Yes.
actually can't wait to see how he's going to impact the rest of the story. I think he's going to have a bigger role. At least I
Yeah.
hope he is to some extent. So I'm interested to see what they do there.
I mean, in
Um,
light of the ending, the possibilities are quite
yeah,
literally limitless for them. But
and I,
yeah, go ahead.
and I was glad to see, Heidegger and Scarlet get more screen time as well, because I feel that they were kind of just, especially Heidegger. Scarlet gets a little bit more in the original, but Heidegger's kind of just the fat guy used for laughs in the original,
Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
here he's like the most ruthless person in Shinra, pretty much. So even though it's kind of stereotypical, it was good to see him. Personally, for me, the thing I really enjoyed was just how different each of the characters played.
yeah,
Even though this is a
yes,
turn-based game and you are going through the menus, every character feels unique. And they kind of did in the original, but only slightly because pretty much it was based on what materia people had equipped it. But here it's very much a case of Cloud feels like the hack and slash guy, like you were saying.
yeah.
Barrett
Tifa
is
feels like the beat 'em up.
Tifa
Barrett
feels like
feels
a
like the
fighter.
shooter.
I mean, straight
Yeah,
up, yeah.
dude.
So I mean,
By the time I got the showstopper
yeah,
ability with Tifa, dude,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a fucking wrap.
yeah.
Dude,
Everything was
yeah, just killing
exactly,
everything.
exactly.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I really love that too. I even I even didn't mind playing as Aerith.
yeah,
Like once you figured out how, I think she was probably the least fun
yeah.
to
She was
play
the least fun to play for me
of
too.
the four, and I think that
But still, it wasn't
goes without
bad.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't bad, and when you know how to build her and her materia and use her magic and
yeah,
her MP more than anything else, it becomes um, more enjoyable. But yeah, and
right.
I even mentioned that to you before. When you play with Cloud, it feels kind of like a Devil May Cry
It does.
style
It
hack
does.
and slash, a little bit of Dark Souls.
Yeah,
Then
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Tifa was
So
fun. I
yeah,
love
she's
using.
great.
She might be my favorite character to
I
play
agree.
with.
I agree. Um, I well, actually, you know what? I'll save that for the second part when we talk about the ending and all that, because I I think what I'm about to say plays into that, so I'll leave that. But yeah, I liked that. I don't know, man. There's a lot of small things in this game that I enjoyed that kind of add up to a cohesive whole. As someone who played through the entirety of Midgar yesterday, um, I think they did a very fantastic job with even the details that I had forgotten
Oh,
about.
you mean the original one? You played through the original?
Because
Oh,
I
okay,
did that
cool.
yesterday, and like the guy, when you get to Seventh Heaven and you're in that dinky little apartment they put you up in, and
Right.
there's that guy next door who is in the black robe or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's actually alluded to in the original, but it's in the slums and it's in a place that you wouldn't normally go into. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing,
Yeah.
but it is. So, like, even these smaller details from the original, they've taken and they bumped them up. So
And
I
made them
have to,
better.
and made them better and actually put them into the actual story. So,
Yeah, and
um,
I mean, really, I think, and I was thinking about this too. And shout out to you for wearing your awesome Game of Thrones shirt today.
oh yeah,
But I feel that I'm a book reader of the A Song of Ice and Fire
yeah,
series, and I think that there are good things that happen when things end up jumping from medium to medium. And
I
when
agree.
you look at the jump in technology from 1997 to 2020, I mean,
Oh
dude,
yeah,
it basically is a new medium. I mean, even though it's still video games, the
yeah, it might as well
possibilities of
be.
what you're able to do and
Yeah,
show are limitless. And just like there were some things that Game of Thrones, the TV show, actually did better than the books,
the book,
that,
right?
yeah, there are a lot of games where there are a lot of times where this remake really did improve upon a lot of the issues of
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII. But Jeffrey, let's not put this off anymore, man. Let's
Yeah,
talk.
let's talk
Let,
about the ending.
dude, let's talk about this Back to the Future bullshit that that's going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
So listen,
I actually,
first off,
go
yeah, go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go
But
ahead. You're good.
I just wanted to say before you say anything that if you're the person who is coming to Final Fantasy VII without prior knowledge of the video game, of the original Final Fantasy VII, how it played and what happened,
Hmm.
I have no idea how those people have any fucking clue
Me
what
either.
happened at the end.
Me either.
I mean, it's
Because
almost like a prerequisite that you kind of have to, like, I think a part of the process of this video game, which is kind of unprecedented to me, is
yeah,
as soon as you're done, you're going online, going on YouTube, trying to
trying
figure
to
out
look shit up.
what the fuck
And,
just happened.
and you know what? I didn't do that, and I texted you yesterday, and I finally said I figured it out, but I
Yeah,
did it myself. I haven't looked at any videos or anything like that because I didn't want it spoiled for me. Because I basically had the game spoiled for me because when I looked up reviews and shit, so I didn't want to do that for the ending of the game. So I've been sitting here pondering this thing for weeks, trying to figure it out. But here's what I've got, and
okay.
you can
And see, so it was actually good because before we did this, before we both started Final
I
Fantasy VII,
was pissed. I was
but
pissed
yeah,
initially.
yeah, and you had seen a bunch of reviews
Yeah.
that I hadn't seen,
Hmm.
but now we're on the flip side of that because
Yeah, where you've seen
after
them all.
yeah, now I've looked up so many different explanations and
Yeah.
like one of the foremost experts on this on YouTube is a guy named Maximilian Dude,
Yeah,
and
Maximilian Dude. He's a good guy.
I've heard about him talking about
Yeah.
this, but
Yeah.
let me hear what you came up with because I'm very
Okay.
interested to hear what you took from that very convoluted mess of an ending.
Okay. Like you said, though, I think before any of that, you not only have to know Final Fantasy VII, you
Right,
have to know the entire compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which
Crisis
in,
Core,
which
Dirge of
includes Crisis,
Cerberus.
yeah, exactly, and Advent Children, most of all.
Yeah,
Um, I actually started to ponder about this even before this ending happened, because as you know, there's an orphanage in Sector 7, where Aerith helps volunteer
yeah,
and all that. Part of that, of course, is in um, Advent Children, because the children get infected with the what do they call it, the geostigma or whatever the hell that
yeah.
disease was. So I was like,
Terrible movie, by the
I, I,
way.
yes, yes, it is
Yeah,
terrible, but that's going to be part of my point. So hang on to that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so what ends up happening is there are these creatures which look straight out of fucking Harry Potter.
They
looks
do.
looks
They
looks like
do. They look like
looks like
fucking
the
Dementors.
Dementors. They look like
They
the Dementors.
100%, Jeffrey. Out of all of the videos that I've looked up, you just hit the nail on the head the best. They
Yeah,
look like the fucking
yeah,
Dementors
they look
from
like
Harry
Dementors
Potter.
from Harry Potter. But what they are, and this is actually common in science fiction, which is why I told you yesterday, think about this in terms of science fiction and not fantasy. Okay? Because in science fiction, there is a concept called the multiverse, right? Which you have every time a major decision is made, the universe splits, okay? And the path that that decision leads you on, is one universe. Whereas in the other universe, you make the other decision
Right.
and another split off and yada yada yada. So, but in order to prevent that, in most cases, in most science fiction, there is a force that stops you and makes you go on a certain path.
Right.
There's usually a predetermined path that everyone has to follow. Destiny with a capital D, as this
Yeah.
game likes to put it. Um, so basically, what it means,
Basically, like in the hero's tale, when
right?
Hagrid goes to
Right.
Harry Potter, the bringer
Yes.
of the message, or
Yes.
Obi-Wan in Star Wars,
Yeah.
that kind of sets our heroes on the journey to come.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what ends up happening is throughout the game, these beings called the Whispers, also called the Arbiters of Fate, whatever the hell you
Right.
want to call them. I call them the Dementors for obvious reasons. But they intervene at certain points to make sure that what happens in this game mirrors the original. Because there
Right.
are several points within this game where it tries to deviate from it. And
Yes.
I'll give you a little bit of an example. So, and I noticed this yesterday when I was playing the original from '97. The encounter with Aerith on the street after you blow up the first Mako reactor,
Right.
she doesn't stop and have a major conversation with you. It's, oh, do you want to buy a flower? And you say yes or no. In this game, in the remake, she actually stops, has a conversation with you, and even debates on going with you to
Yeah.
wherever you're going. The Arbiters of Fate step in, whisk her away, which gives the Shinra soldiers enough time to catch up with you
Yeah.
so that you can jump on the train and do that whole thing.
Yeah.
But if that hadn't happened, if they hadn't intervened, the entire story would have been different. There's a tiny point, well, not a tiny point, but in the church, for example, there's a point where Aerith almost falls. They
Yeah.
stop her from
From
falling.
falling.
Um,
Because
there's
Reno and Rude
Reno and Root,
Reno would have captured her and would have
right?
taken her hostage then.
And that whole
Yeah.
thing. So there, and I encourage anybody who's playing this game or who's played this game to go back specifically to these points. And if you have any, knowledge of the original one, see at what points these happen and how the arbiters kind of keep it on track. Because
Yeah.
they really do. They keep the original thing on track. All that said, okay, at the end of the game, all right, some shit goes down because
A lot of crazy shit goes down.
Barrett actually gets stabbed.
Yes, which
Um,
does not happen
and
in the original.
and is presumed dead, but then he comes back because one of the arbiters, intervenes and,
Yeah.
and lets him live. Um, but basically, at the end of the game, you are put up against this giant ass eldritch being boss. I even forget the name of it, but it's basically
The
the head of
Harbinger. Yeah,
the
like the
harbinger,
Harbinger. For a
who
minute, I
is
thought I was playing fucking Kingdom Hearts.
well, and
Eh,
that's what I was gonna say
yeah.
is this thing looks like Darkseid out of Kingdom Hearts. So
Yeah,
the
it
shadow from
does.
Sora, it looks a
Yeah.
lot like that. But if you look very carefully, the three tiny ones that you fight, because you fight the
Yes.
three other ones.
And I'm
before you.
interested to hear what you took from those three, because now
So,
I've heard another theory that I subscribe to even more, but I want to hear what you came up with, which it might
so,
be.
so if you notice, each of those attacks you in a different way. Um,
Right.
One uses its fist, one uses a sword, and one uses a ranged weapon. You want to tell me who those are supposed to be echoes of? Because I saw
Barrett,
it.
Tifa, and Cloud. But
So
so by the way, yeah, well, go ahead. I want you
they
to
they were
finish your
they were destroying their own destinies, right? So they were breaking their own bonds so that they don't have to follow the events that happened in the original. Not only that, but as you're fighting the Harbinger, you get glimpses of things that happened in the original game. You see the death of Aerith, you see the meteor coming down, you see all of these things.
right.
And basically, they're breaking away from that. Um, so basically, uh, from a gameplay perspective, it's well, not even a gameplay perspective. From a story perspective, it's a way for the developer to say, "Screw the original. We can now do whatever the hell we
Yeah, we
want."
want to do
Uh,
our own thing and be able to deviate away from the original plot line of Final
right.
Fantasy VII, which I
Yeah, exactly.
understand. And as
Yeah.
a developer, you want to do different
To
things.
to some degree, but here's something that I don't think anybody else has said. I'm pretty sure, well, I don't know if anybody's ever said about the three little arbiters that you fought that
Yeah,
I just
so a
said.
lot of people,
Okay.
most people, from what I've heard, they adhere to the theory uh, that you just said. I've
Okay.
heard
Okay,
another
cool.
one that I actually subscribe to even more in light of who we learn of what this Sephiroth is. So let me just jump in here and say this.
Yes, yes,
Um,
please.
from not knowing any of that shit that you said, which is pretty spot on. My least favorite parts of the game as I'm playing through it are these Dementors.
Yes.
And it's every time I see Sephiroth, because
Yep.
even though Final Fantasy VII was never the penultimate Final Fantasy for me, I've always understood who Sephiroth
Who Sephiroth
is
was.
and how
Yes.
important he was as a villain. So
Yes.
you don't like the fact that you kept on seeing Sephiroth. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are they doing here
There's a
right now?
reason
Like,
for that, though.
right, and I know the reason now, or I know what they were trying to do with Sephiroth, but as I'm going through it, and it does matter though, because and that's why I said such an important part of this game is the conclusions that you come to
Mhm.
after you're done playing it and
Yeah.
listen to other people theorize. And the reason I say that is because in your first playthrough, when you're not aware of any of that,
Right.
it's so convoluted
It
and it's
is.
never
Oh my God. It's
and
yeah.
it's never explained well throughout the course of the game.
No.
Why am I
And
seeing Sephiroth all the time?
yeah.
Why is Cloud constantly seeing visions of Aerith's death?
Yeah.
So and by the way, that brings me back to what I said when I
Mhm.
started talking about this. Like, maybe if you have played the original Final Fantasies
Right.
and or Final Fantasy VII, and you're a clever person, well then maybe you start to piece this together over time.
Right.
But like I said, if you've never played that before, you have no context for
Right.
what's going on, for why it's happening. Who's this? I mean, you might know the name Sephiroth and know that he's
Yeah,
the
but
main, but you have no
yeah.
idea what his motivations are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much of that is conveyed through the gameplay of
It
the
is.
original Final Fantasy VII. When after Midgar, you have the flashback
Mhm.
where you play as Cloud and Sephiroth, and Cloud does like 30 damage, and
Yeah,
then
it's
and then Sephiroth just annihilates it
annihilates everything
in one, and
in
you,
one
you
hit.
you
Yeah.
start to feel the gravity
Powerless. Yeah.
of this. Oh my God, this is Sephiroth! Like
Mhm.
Sephiroth, and that's what makes it all the more impactful
I agree.
later on when he ends up going apeshit crazy. And so as I'm playing through the game and I do know these things, I'm thinking to myself, man, if you're just playing through this for the first time and all you know is that Sephiroth is the villain and is a character who exists, you have no motivation for who he is and why he's there. You don't know why he's so evil. You don't know why you keep having flashbacks about him.
Right.
And then you have this ending, which, by the way, I'll say this: other than fighting Sephiroth himself, I felt like the gameplay and the level design of that final battle were kind of boring, and they were it was so different than everything that had preceded it.
Well, because it was a set piece, right?
Right.
Because I mean, you're moving, you're sliding down shit, you're doing all kinds of stuff. This isn't about the fight itself. It's about the spectacle of beating this huge, giant ass, harbinger or whatever. It's not about the gameplay at that point. It's, oh shit, how can we make this the most epic thing ever? And it doesn't really work. But I want to hear your theory about Sephiroth and why he's here early, because I have my own, and I want to hear yours.
Again, and this is where I'm very hesitant about the future of this, because basically what you have to understand and what they're making it out to be is that's Sephiroth from the original timeline, the original one who knows that he failed, and that he wasn't able to do it, and Cloud and them ultimately won. So what you're essentially led to believe, and again, by the way, I did not come up with all this shit on my own. Like Jeffrey, I go back to, looking up videos and seeing what people are saying. You essentially come to the conclusion that this is Advent Children Sephiroth.
Yes,
this is not
who it is.
This is not a remake. It is a sequel.
It is
of all the original Final Fantasies that is now trying to change a different timeline, and that's exactly what the heart, and that's what the Dementors were, or the whatever they're called. The ending represented them, choosing to sidestep fate, and
not only that, but I think Sephiroth literally pushed them down this path and came to Cloud as a way for the Arbiter to die. So that things could change, so that he could win. Throughout the game, Cloud sees, and at first I thought, it's PTSD, from whatever, or having the mixed identity with Zack, or, whatever.
And that's another thing. By the way, you see Zack. You see Zack, and you're given no context on who he is, unless you have the subtitles on and you see his name. But again, it goes back to what you said when you started. You have to know, it's not just Final Fantasy VII. It kind of wants you to, know Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children.
Advent Children especially, because that fight with Sephiroth is straight out of Advent Children. Even the way the buildings are crumbling, the concrete you're standing on, everything. It's straight out of Advent Children. Not to mention his design is straight out of Advent Children. Because obviously there's going to be a big disparage between, the PlayStation original and what we're capable of now. But if you look very closely, and this is how I figured it out, which seems like the most minute detail in the fucking world, but I figured it out. Sephiroth has his wing. And I was like... I was like, why does Sephiroth have a wing at this point in the game? Because, as we all know, he's called the One-Winged Angel, but you don't actually see his wing until the final fight in the original. Okay? But he's got his wing now. And at first I thought, well, that might just be a modern design choice, because he had his wing in, Kingdom Hearts when he showed up. And in most interpretations now, he has his wing. But I'm like, in 7, that doesn't make any sense. He shouldn't have his wing now.
Right. And that is a good an arrow that points you in the direction of, okay, this is a different timeline thing. But this is ultimately what I wanted to say, though, is that, So one, I want to have this as a separate topic itself for us to talk about in a minute, like
Sure.
what the future of these Final Fantasy sevens are going to be, what they're going to look like, what they're going to be about, because it
Hmm.
has a lot of implications.
It
Um,
does.
a ton of them, but
Right.
this is my hesitation why I didn't like it so much. So maybe I think, and a lot of people have said this, that once you understand all these things,
Hmm.
that when you play through this game a second time, it's almost an entirely different experience when you
It
know
is.
these
Yeah.
things, because now
Hmm.
you're able to pick up on stuff that you weren't able to previously.
That you
But
didn't.
that's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
credit to them because
Yeah,
it
I
builds
agree.
on the longevity of the game, and
Exactly.
it prompts you to play more even after you have already finished it.
I agree.
And there's a hard mode with new bosses and items and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah,
um, that's a credit to them. But
I agree.
this is my hesitation, and you probably know where I'm going with this because you know me.
Hmm.
I have seen them turn Kingdom Hearts
Yes,
into a convoluted
it is.
mess of
Yep.
characters and hollows and nobodies, and then
Yep.
you see what they did with the Final Fantasy 13 series,
Yes.
just all these
And
different timelines and worlds and all this stuff that eventually, as it moves on, it's like this is such a mess. I don't
yeah,
care at all, to the point where I'm apathetic. I'm not even gonna play this shit.
yeah.
So for the
I
idea
am worried. Yeah.
for the idea of them now doing this with Final Fantasy VII, it's like that scares the shit out of me. I don't
Yeah.
know that I trust Square Enix enough to pull this off. Now,
Yeah. I certainly don't.
credit to them.
Hmm.
A lot of people didn't have faith that they'd be able to pull off this game, and I
At
think for
all.
the most
Yeah.
part, they did.
They did.
And it also, like Final Fantasy 15, it
Hmm.
went through a hellacious,
Development hell.
yeah,
Yep.
development cycle, a lot of change in the, Tetsuya Nomura didn't even know that he was a director at a certain
Oh
point,
God.
and he was the director. So it's like
Hmm.
there was like the it ended up turning out to be an incredible experience that not a lot of people thought that it would be.
I
But
agree.
going forward, I just don't have a lot of faith that Square Enix isn't going to jumble this up and make it some more convoluted mess that now is nothing like Final Fantasy VII, and
Well, and
like what drew you to it.
yeah, and that's kind of my issue. You mentioned Tetsuya Nomura. He's the thing that scares me the most because,
Yeah,
like you said, he's the guy for Kingdom Hearts, and as you know, the original Kingdom Hearts was pretty straightforward. Light
yeah,
versus darkness. There was a little bit of a twist when it turned out it was Ansem in the end, and
right.
which turned out to be retconned anyway.
Yeah,
Later on down the line. But I digress. One was easy to follow, and then Chain of Memories and two happened, and then the whole
yeah.
the
So
whole thing
that
just got
kind of
crazy.
And then that
So
kind of brings me to the second point of what I was saying though is like, what is the future of these games? Because if we're now under the auspice that, okay, this is not the same Sephiroth that's
mhm,
actually in the world. It
right,
not only does it implement all these other questions like, okay, are we ever going to see the Sephiroth of this world
I think so.
along
I,
with the Sephiroth of the future? And
yep.
then that also brings in the fact that, well, what does it, are we ever going to see and hear from the cloud of the original timeline as
Hmm.
well? Like all
Yeah,
of
and
these kind of go into that, and
yep,
it if they no longer have the structure of
yep.
the original Final Fantasy VII, then I don't know how far these deviations are going to spin us in one direction or the other.
Well, I think I mean they've obviously done that on purpose. And what I'm gonna say is probably gonna irritate a lot of people. But I think they're trying to kill the original. Not only kill the original, but kill the entire compilation. They
Yeah,
don't want because I tried looking into the compilation like Crisis Core. I've never played Crisis Core, but I watched a story rundown. I've obviously seen Advent Children twice, I think, and I hated it both times. It's very clear if you ask any fan, even if they are a fan of 7, they're going to tell you that the overall compilation is garbage. So what they're trying to do is kill it. And unfortunately, I don't think
But
what's it
see,
called?
well,
I
go ahead
don't
and finish the
I
thought.
don't think space time has any reason to be in a Final Fantasy game. I don't
Right.
think time travel should be involved. Uh, they did the same kind of shit with 13-2, or
Yeah.
look how that shit turned out.
And that's
I'm
what scares me, man. That's
Yeah.
what absolutely terrifies me. And see, this is where I don't know if I agree with you because
Mhm,
you're saying well that they're trying to destroy that whole thing, but
mhm,
in my mind, it kind of feels like they're taking all that shit that they built up after Final Fantasy VII that they were never
mhm.
willing to touch for forever, and they made all these sequels and prequels and shit. But now it feels like they're incorporating that even heavier into this
Uh,
because one of the things
yeah.
I did find out when you see Zach and,
Mhm,
and it shows him and the Shinra soldiers that surround him,
mhm.
it is literally a shot for shot remake of the cutscene that happened in Crisis Core.
Yeah, the
It's
end of
it's
Crisis Core.
literally
Yeah.
yeah, it's literally identical. And then you see him walking away with Cloud at the end, and you see the bag fly by, and there's a
Mhm.
different version of Stamp. So the
Yeah.
dog that you have been seeing all
Yeah.
around
Stamp.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
it's a different kind
It's
of
different.
dog.
Which
So
means
much
he
like
comes from an entirely different universe, which
right, an
is,
entirely different
oh my
universe
god.
and timeline. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're off the rails now, if Final Fantasy VII is under no obligation to bring us the moments that we know and love from the original, even the characters. Like, what if they decide, oh no, in this timeline, there is no Cat Sith, or there is
Well,
no Yuffie, or there is no
well, we
Vincent?
saw Gatseth already. We saw him for a brief
Did we?
second. Yeah,
When
you
did we
don't
see?
remember that when the plate falls and he's like on top of the Shinra building and he's
That's
like,
right. They
yeah,
did show him. They
you do
yeah.
see him. It's only for like five
Right.
seconds, but you do see Katsus. So I mean, he's gonna be there at some point. Um, I maybe you're right. Maybe this is just a way to bring all the compilation together so that it kind of makes sense. Because the
Yeah.
other thing about the
You have
compilation,
to like it now.
well, not only that, but like if you go and you do all these things individually, if you watch Advent Children, if you play Crisis Core, they all feel disconnected because the way the characters are represented in each one of those is vastly different than the way they are represented, in other media. So,
Yeah.
like, this is a way, I think, either for them to destroy the whole thing and start from scratch, or it's a way for them to bring everything together in one cohesive story. Either
Yeah.
way, it's a very bullshit way to do it. Um, I've always been of the subscription that, and this is me personally, but I don't think the concepts of science fiction and fantasy blend very well. To me, you're going to do either one or the other because
Yeah.
fantasy and science fiction are complete and total opposites of one another. Either you have magic and dragons and shit, or you have actual like space technology,
Yeah.
actual mathematical equations
And
for
and
for
it's
shit to happen.
and
You
Final
know,
Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, they were very I mean, they had a lot of science fiction
right,
principles in
right.
them, and I feel like traditionally Square did this very good. And again, like I've looked up videos
Right.
since then, and I've heard. So forgive me if I'm inevitably stealing maybe ideas that I've heard
No, it's
already,
cool.
but
I
someone
haven't
said
heard them, so go ahead.
well, and someone said something that I resonated with. This game, for the most part, when you're playing through it, felt like a SquareSoft title.
It
Like
did.
not Square Enix and all this mess that they put out today that
The
in my
old
mind
Squaresoft.
has
Yeah.
so sullied the name and the reputation of Final Fantasy. But the actual Squaresoft days, where every time they put something out, it
was a
felt
big deal.
meaningful. It
Yeah,
felt
it
like
was a big deal.
they had something to say and they had an experience that they wanted you to have that you weren't getting from other developers at that point in time.
Right.
And this game felt like that. So it's at 95% of this game felt like Squaresoft. And then here comes Square Enix at the end.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
hey,
exactly.
baby, did you miss me? It's like,
Well,
no, it turns out I didn't, dude, but you're here anyway. So go ahead and do whatever you're going to do.
but that's Nomura for you. And I hate to bring this all on one man, but I mean, really, that's when I started to notice all this shit. Not just Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy 15, because 15 had this weird ass thing in it too.
Yeah.
As far as like when you learn, not to go off on a tangent on 15,
No, you're
but like
fine.
when you learn about like the Empire and how they're like synthetics, like they're not even real
Yeah.
people, they're like these weird ass AI robot things, and then you find
Yeah.
out Prompto's actually one of those things, and you're
Yeah,
like, what the fuck?
it's like some Westworld bullshit.
Yeah, what's wrong? That's a good way
Yeah,
to put it.
yeah, I mean, it really is like that, and I'm also, it goes back to the villain things, and I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and one of the things that I do love is when you have villains that have gray area. Like there's so for example, especially seeing how terrible Shinra is in this game, at a certain point, you kind of understand the method behind Sephiroth's madness,
Yeah,
and
like,
wanting
exactly.
to destroy the world, because it's like all these people are terrible anyway, and they're just gonna do nothing but destroy the planet. So I might as well take them out too. Like why not? And you see how terrible the actions of the powers of that world are, and you understand the things with Sephiroth and what happened to him and what prompted him to do that, knowing that he's the genetic creation of this world-ending thing called Genova. It's like, yeah, it's so with what you were saying with Final Fantasy 15, it's like, yeah, when they just become a bunch of robots, like you lose your ability to empathize with them.
Yeah, and it's the thing, like in the original, when you, I mean, assuming you didn't know anything about it beforehand, when you come across Genova, like they make Genova this big thing. Like when Cloud is peeking through the thing and, you actually like see this grotesque Eldritch, like H.P. Lovecraft looking,
I mean,
Cthulhu looking monster, and you're like, what the fuck? But in this game, it's just like, okay, there's a tentacle monster here, but what? Why?
Yeah, and they show her, and then the Genova Dreamweaver that you end up fighting, like you do end up fighting pieces and parts of Genova later on in the original Final Fantasy, but it kind of sped it up a little bit. But
there was no build up though. Because like in the original, there's like that horror music, there's blood everywhere, like on the ground and shit. Like I mean, it's a big thing. Like when Genova busts out, and you still don't know what the hell it is or why it's there, but there's this creepy ass feeling. Whereas in this one, you just fight a tentacle monster, and it just is there, and you're like, what? So it's really, really strange. And I actually wonder, not to go too far back, but I wonder if Genova has anything to do with the time splitting. Because
it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, because if she's, really this being from outer space, the end all do all, and her and Sephiroth are genetically, the same thing.
Yeah.
Does she have some control over space time? Which wouldn't surprise me.
And then at the end of the game, you essentially go to like the edge of creation. So that kind of lends to that theory too. And you don't know how Sephiroth is, if he is moving through time, you don't understand the mechanics of how he's doing. And again, I understand that a lot of this is meant to have a big question mark around it, so that way you're going to play the subsequent games that come after. So
But
I understand that.
But that's kind of what you were saying, though.
Right.
Is it worth it now?
Yeah.
Because
Are you not going to fumble the football? Like, dude, it's third down. I have to have a first down.
Yeah.
I need to know that when I throw you this damn ball, you're going to catch the thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that Square Enix is going to do that. And maybe I'm being too hard on it. Like I said, a lot of people didn't. A lot of pessimistic people weren't too high on Square being able to pull this off.
Right.
But I feel for the most part they did do that. It's just in my mind already. Sephiroth is so important to the story.
Yeah, and
that so much of this is already lost by the fact that you're not able to build him up in the way that made it so meaningful in the original Final Fantasy VII. I didn't even like the design of his eyes. So if you notice, he had like snake eyes, like slits in his eyes, and it does make him look creepy as fuck.
Right.
But there's something even more sadistic and cold about a person that you see them move from this heroic figure that everyone knows and loves. This is Sephiroth. There's been no greater soldier in the history of soldier than Sephiroth. It's like the most it's like I don't know if there's any anime fans, but like All Might from My Hero Academia. It's like everyone looks up to this dude so much and they love him for what he's done and the kind of hero that he is. But then in Final Fantasy VII, you see this dive into madness, and it's already mixed with a person that is so much more powerful than everyone else. It's like, no, you don't want that guy to be your enemy. Yeah, and especially when he goes crazy and just starts murdering everyone and everything. You had this feel of, oh shit, like that. This is gonna get very, very real. A lot of people had emotional connections to him because they were from Nibelheim. So he burns everything to the ground. You have this revenge angle. There's so much that goes to it that I don't know what the remake is going to be able to do to reintroduce that. And maybe
are we even going to go to Nibelheim in the remake? Because
I kind of think they have to, right?
Well, yeah,
but they've already
shown
it so
I don't think there's any reason for them to, though. But from what the original did with it, because that's when you learned the story and the whole 9 yards and all that. But they've changed a lot of it. It's really, really off-putting in a way. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the biggest proponent of the original Final Fantasy VII. It actually ranks in my bottom 3 in terms of Final Fantasy games, which I'm probably going to get a lot of heat for. But
it's your opinion and you're entitled to it.
I understand how important this story is to because for a lot of people it was their first introduction to RPG. A lot of people love these characters, so I don't understand what they're going to do. Are because of this space-time continuum thing, are they going to drastically change things, or are they going to try to stick to the original as much as they can? But then why do that in the first place? There's so many
they've questions. And that is kind of the ending in and of itself. A lot of this is the developers talking to you and saying, look, we're going to take the reins off and subvert all your expectations. And in my mind, I don't even know what you're going to call this next game. Are you going to still call it a remake? If you've taken the shackles off, and it's such a huge question going forward. And I get that Square probably wants you to have those questions, but what obligation are they under to show you and present things to you from the original, and how important are they going to be? I mean, now we know that Zach has survived in this other timeline, but are we going to have a scenario where timelines are going to cross, and like, are Cloud and Zach going to reunite in some kind of cross universe crossover bullshit? And so that's when my asshole clenches up. I'm like, oh, what? That's what we're gonna do?
Yeah,
like,
don't do
yeah,
that.
Like that doesn't, like, I don't. I mean, and maybe they're able to present it in a way that makes it enjoyable, that we're not prepared for or expecting.
Possibly.
But I don't, it's like I said, and okay, here's the bigger question: are we now gonna move to a point where Aerith doesn't die?
That's what I'm thinking.
How important is that going forward?
I think someone else is gonna die in her place. I honestly think we're gonna lose someone else. I don't know who, but with them kind of catching a glimpse of Aerith's death, I mean, it would make sense that, like, Cloud may be able to recognize it, right before it's about to happen, and, be able to prevent it, now that he's kind of seen this glimpse.
Or maybe he knows about it. Maybe even Aerith at some point knows about it. Hey, so you remember that there's that part where in the game where Cloud's dreaming, and then he talks to Aerith. And then again, this is one of those scenes that you understand better knowing all this information that we're talking about. She says to him, hey, don't fall in love. Don't get attached to me, because in the end, it's like she knows that she's gonna die. So are we gonna now move into a scenario where going forward, Cloud and Aerith are like, hey, Aerith knows that she's gonna die, but now there's a concerted effort to try and make sure that she doesn't die. Very much Yuna from Final Fantasy X. Knowing that she ultimately was going to end up dying, but she had to carry out this task anyway. And then Tidus is like, no, fuck that. We're going to buck the trend and you're going to live. Like, is that what we're going to be doing now?
Or is the overall message, and we'll see as this goes on, but is the overall message that even if you defy destiny, shit ends up happening the same way anyway? I mean, what if Aerith does die? What if everything, even if it happens in a slightly different way, what if everything ends up being the same anyway? Which is a very pessimistic message, if that's what they're going for. But I did think about that, because I'm like, everything that happens in this original game happens, but slightly differently. And I'm like, well, what if that's the whole point of this whole thing? Is no matter what you do, you're always going to be who you are. Which, again, is very pessimistic and flies in the face of free will and, just about every other human concept. But that is worth noting. I kind of, one small thing that has nothing to do with anything, but still kind of pisses me off. You couldn't play as Red 13. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I did want to talk to you about this. And okay, you didn't like it. I didn't like it either, but I understood it.
I did too.
Because it was so late. It's very late in the game. You don't really get a chance to have an opportunity to build him up the way that you want to. It's materia and all these other things. You don't get a lot of time to learn how to use him. So I understand the decision. I understand why they did it. I also would have liked to have played as him, but I also think it was a very deliberate thing that the developers decided you're going to play 4 characters throughout this entire game, because they're the ones that you're going to utilize the most and play with. So we're just going to focus on these 4 instead of having to put more time and efforts into coding a whole other character and putting a whole other set of moves for character that you're not going to be able to use for very long. So
Yeah.
I
And
understood it, even though I was
get it.
disappointed by it.
I get it, but I don't like how he was just used to run across walls and hit levers and do all this gimmicky bullshit. I didn't like the fact, and this goes to another mechanical thing, but when you're switching back and forth between characters in that laboratory, when you're switching back and forth between parties, you can't just say, okay, move all your materia over to this character. You individually have to go into the menu and switch materia, which was ridiculous. Because even the original got that right. You could hit all, and it would move all your materia over to a character if you had enough slots. So this brings me on to something that I've been pondering is, do you think that these games are going to be connected gameplay-wise in terms of being able to transfer your data over to part 2? Because the way that this game is structured, the way the end game is structured, the way that you have all these powerful ass materias by the end of this game makes me think that you're going to be starting at level 1 when you boot up part 2.
I kind of think so too. And then I think another interesting question to ponder, and that kind of goes with that as well, is what are the chances that this next game is an open world game? Yeah. Because we clearly know that Square has the capability to do it with Final Fantasy 15.
Right.
So we've seen them make this big open world, and that was
terribly by the end, but yeah.
Well, I mean, so the I don't think that they necessarily did it terribly. I mean, because I think for the most part, if you played Final Fantasy 15, that was the most enjoyable part. Like, there were times when I just forgot about the story altogether, and I'm doing nothing but quests, and that's one of the good things about an open world title.
Right.
But it was later on that it ended up going to this much more traditional Final Fantasy linear corridors, and it kind of moves you along nicely at the end. And a lot of people didn't like that. So what I'm wondering is, knowing the original one and how much the game opened up after Midgar, is there a chance that they do play with this open world type thing? And is there a possibility? So also consider this too. We're probably talking about this. Well, not probably. This is going to be a PlayStation 5 title.
Oh, most definitely.
When it drops, and the new Xbox whenever it comes out for that. So, what are the possibilities that we're generally going to have a Final Fantasy VII that you can go to Golden Saucer, go to just like the original one where it had this open world, and then when you went to a town or whatever, it turned into a linear experience. I mean, if you were able to blend both of those on next generation platform and power and processor, that might be a real cool experience to look forward to, no matter what they end up doing with the story.
I agree to a certain extent, because they're already starting to, like, a lot of the quests you mentioned, or go here and kill this monster, or go find these lost cats. These are very open world mission structures that most games fall into. Typically, they're usually more like MMO structures, but generally, bigger open spaces. So they could very much have this whole, go hunt this or go find this item and bring it back. But I don't want that. It's not that I don't want an open world, but I don't want generic fetch quests. I want side quests that actually mean something. So, for example, when you go find Yuffie, for example, I want that to be an entire optional side quest, like it was in the original. But I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a main story standpoint because of the way they've already been mentioning Wutai. They've mentioned Wutai throughout the Midgar section, and I'm like, Wutai never had this much impact. in the original game, because in this one, you find out that uh, Wu Tai is actually helping supply one of the teams of Avalanche with all their military gear and
Yeah.
shit. That was not in the original, at least not to my recollection. I don't remember because I didn't go that far when I played the original section yesterday. But I mean, that's a whole nother thing. Um, who else is optional? Oh, Vincent. I want Vincent to be optional. You know, I
Yeah.
I, I want I want there to be real reward for going off and doing things, even if it's like super powerful, like materia or an
Yeah,
accessory,
like
or
that's
like I
part of
said,
the fun. Like that's part of the fun in Final Fantasy in general. Is
right?
that is that if you want to really get the full experience, it's
Mhm.
going to take you looking deeper, choosing to go off the beaten path whenever you can do that. Play the side quest and the mini games, and I'm excited to see how they implement Golden Saucer,
Yeah.
which has already been alluded to a
Oh
lot.
yeah.
All the chocobo
The
racing and
chocobo,
snowboarding, all
and
the
then the kids with they had the golden
yeah, like
saucer
all
theme playing in the
and
background.
that's where in my mind I'm saying probably more than likely they are going to end up making this a more open experience, because to be honest I don't know how you would do it any other way.
Right.
I'm not knowing it was so convenient for them that the original Final Fantasy VII had this long drawn out portion where you're in a giant metropolis, where you're
Yeah.
in Midgar, because it afforded them the ability to make this game be big and realized, but
Mm.
also linear at the same time, where
Right.
you don't have to make these sprawling landscapes that you traverse and all the different kinds of monsters that lie here and in between. But
Hmm.
as you move forward, I mean, the game is drastically different. I mean, I remember, oh, I know this now, but at the time, people in the 90s, they were very surprised at
Yeah.
how much the game did change after Midgar, because most of the marketing material, the commercials, all
Was
that
Midgar.
stuff,
Yeah.
yeah, centered around things that happened in Midgar. So it
Hmm.
really took people by surprise when the game then opened up to this much larger world. And
Yeah.
I think that as we move into this next generation of consoles, it's like, man, I can't imagine a better title to utilize the loading times and the processing
Right.
power of these games. When now you'll be able to create this incredible, fully realized world that they actually live in.
And that's the thing. I think that's why they purposely made this section Midgar only, was because it was in a lot of aspects very linear, which is going to give them time to properly, you know, do these open world sections, even if they're not as big as like what you're saying. They're clearly going to be bigger than they were in the original. So I think they're going to need all this extra time to do that, which is fine. I just on the whole, I'm just I'm really I'm
Yeah.
skeptical.
Yeah,
I'm
me
that's
too.
that's the
I
best
think
way to
you and
put it.
I are probably Um, and by the way, I give credit to this man, Jeffrey, right here, because so Jeffrey beat it before I did. And then we ended up having to push. That's why this podcast is so late. I've been, really busy doing stuff with draft tech and football related. Now all that's done. So these are all
Yep.
going to continue to come out on time as they should.
Oh yeah.
But
Friday. Yeah.
Jeffrey told me, uh, uh, tell me what you think, because you're gonna hate the ending. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but damn, dude, you don't know that. Like, I might
I
love
did
it.
know that.
He said, no, you're gonna fucking hate this shit. And then, dude, as I was fighting Sephiroth, getting my ass whooped at first, I'm like, yeah, yeah, Jeffrey was right. I'm
Yeah.
not having fun right
Yeah.
now. Like, I'm really not enjoying this. But yeah, you called it, and I think that you and I are in lockstep. I think I'm excited about the possibilities of what they might be able to do, and
But
they
it's the
do deserve,
execution.
and they do deserve some credit, because, as I've said for the third time now, a lot of people like us who don't have a lot of faith in Square Enix anymore were very pleasantly surprised by what the majority of this game ended up
I
being.
was.
It was a very pleasant, it was, I had so much. I don't remember the last time, but
I
yeah,
wanted to beat a game. Yeah.
The last time I had this much fun
I
with
agree.
video game was God of War 3. And I love both of them. Like, I think they're fantastic titles, and it's another example of at the end of every console cycle, I feel like there's a game that comes out that kind of exemplifies what that system could do, and it kind of and it's like the full power and efforts of what this console cycle was able to produce. And like I said, I that's why we saved our end discussion for last, because for the most part, like I said, man, I loved realizing Midgar, getting to know the characters in far more detail than I ever have before. They did so much well. And part of what makes it so disappointing is that the ending had almost nothing to do
with the rest of it.
Anything that you had been doing previously.
Right. And I mean, that's my ultimate issue, is if you aren't acquainted with Final Fantasy VII as a whole, which is the entire compilation, unless you look up a video, you're going to be like, what the hell is going on? And even then, like you're not going to like it. I don't like it personally. I'm just glad I figured it out. It took me weeks to figure this shit out, man.
Jeffrey, it's not even that I don't like it, because I do think there are a lot of different avenues in which this thing can go that could be really fun. So, like what I was telling you about with Aerith, like maybe there is a situation where the whole group has a sit down, and once they start to figure out what's happening, maybe they say, "Hey, listen, you guys, we're trying to change history, and the normal timeline, Aerith is going to die. And so now we're going to have to do everything in our power to prevent that." Like, that does seem kind of fun if done well.
It can be. Yeah, if done well.
And that's there it is. If done well.
Right.
And knowing how they did Kingdom Hearts as it moved forward, knowing how they did the Final Fantasy 13, and even later on with 15, there's so much cause for concern moving forward about this being a continuously enjoyable experience.
Right. Well, I don't want to end on a negative note, because that would be terrible. You mentioned the Golden Saucer. Is there anything else in particular moving forward that you really are excited to see?
Well, yeah. So, okay. How important is the black materia going to be? But that was, and that's another thing. And I'm happy that you brought me to this. It's like, everything that all of the major story points of the original Final Fantasy were kind of revealed to players, but before the end of this whole thing. So, now, you saw the meteor, you saw Sephiroth, you saw Genova, you've already seen, I mean, even though it didn't show it frame for frame, you saw moments of Aerith's death. They even talk about it when it says, what are you going to do with 7 seconds? And by the way, people timed the original. It's 7 seconds.
7 seconds.
From when Cloud sees what's happening and Sephiroth stabs her in the back.
Right.
A lot of it, was done well, even in the end when you don't know what's happening. It's like it does open up a lot of doors. So it's not that it has to be terrible.
Right.
It's that they have to execute and stick the landing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a legitimate concern
It
as
is.
to whether or not they will do that. Do you have any any final thoughts about how about this? We're right now at 1 minute and 30 seconds in my recording. So this is our longest podcast to date.
You mean
And
an
I love,
hour? You
yeah,
mean
an
an hour,
hour.
not a minute.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, not a minute. Apparently my brain isn't meant to go longer than an hour. But we're at an hour and 30 minutes. This is our longest show to date. I feel it was our best discussion.
I think so too.
Yeah. Jeffrey, you said you don't want to end on a bad note. How do you want to end it? What are your in summation? What are Jeffrey Redmond's final thoughts and feelings about the game, the experience, and moving forward?
I love the game. I think it's, as far as the game, other than the ending, the game was fantastic. It basically took everything that the original did and bumped it up to 11. And especially the combat. The combat, again, is probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Like I said, some of the side quests got repetitive, but they added some really cool stuff, like the Don Corneo Coliseum. Like, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that they turned the house demon, who was a minor character, or a minor fight, they turned her into a whole damn boss fight.
It was a whole thing, and it was such a great nod to the original fans. I felt like there were a ton of great nods to the original fans. Like I said, my condolences to all the people that played this without any prior knowledge.
Oh my God.
Of Final Fantasy VII. I feel like it was probably, I feel maybe a lot of people felt the same way that we do. They enjoyed the whole game, but hey, what the fuck happened at the end? And then, like I said, it becomes a part of the experience of the game to, like we were talking about with the Last of Us discussion, living in 2020, social media is a part of everything that we do. So it was a very real part of my experience with this, delving into what happened. Because even at the end of it, I had no idea in my mind that this was the Advent Children Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Like that had never popped up in my brain. I was mad that we never got a real solid reveal of what was happening with Sephiroth, what was happening with the Whisper Hollow, whatever the hell they are. Yeah, the Dementors, as Jeffrey so affectionately calls them. Like,
I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, up until the very end, the game was incredible, and then it just doesn't stick the landing, or maybe it does. Maybe it sets up well for whatever they're going to end up doing, but a lot of confusion at the end of what was overall. I found it to be an incredibly enjoyable experience with a great intuitive combat system that both felt modern and action packed for a wider 2020 audience.
Yeah.
But at the same time was an RPG that wanted you to use haste and all of your it blended both of them incredibly well, to the point where I think it was the most enjoyable action RPG that I've probably ever played.
And I think for everybody a little bit skeptical of the future of this game, there's one other thing to keep in mind, and that is that we don't have all our characters yet. So there are plenty of characters still to come. You get to play as Red 13 eventually, I hope. You get Kate Sith, you get Vincent, you get Yuffie.
Vincent, the emo edgelord Vincent.
Vampire.
Vampire
that supposed to be.
That every angst-ridden 90s baby end up idolizing as they listen to their Hawthorne Heights songs.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, you painted that as it's pretty
Yeah,
accurate as
those are
good.
pretty apt
But
description of Vincent fans, right?
but I mean, just there is hope, even if the story goes completely off the damn rails. Um, if they developed these coming characters, not just in a character development way, but in a battle mechanic way, the way they have done with the four that we have, um, I'm I'm down. I want to know what Vincent plays like. I want to know what because Yuffie better feel like
Yeah.
a fucking ninja. If she doesn't feel like a ninja, I'm gonna be
Yeah,
pissed.
right. Yeah.
Uh, you know,
It will be fun to see how they implemented both of those characters
right?
because they both do a little bit of the long range
Yeah,
and the physical.
exactly.
Kunai and a
Right.
gun or a shuriken rather.
Right.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful moving forward, and I think
Yeah.
the Square did a great job in there being a lot of questions that no matter what kind of fan you are, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy VII or not, they are not giving you all the answers, and maybe
No,
they don't even know. Maybe they don't
I
even
don't think
know.
they do.
Well, yeah, and that's a real possibility that they just wanted to make a game that was both true to Final Fantasy VII, but as it moved forward, allowed them to take the reins off themselves, so as to not be at the the mercy of the vitriol of the ultimate Final Fantasy VII
Right.
fans.
And I think that's what they were afraid of. They're like, okay, if we do this beat by beat, people are going to complain that it's the same. But if we don't, we're going to anger the major fans. So we need an out. And I don't agree with the out that they took, but I understand the necessity for them to do so. So I am I'm oh Sid. I forgot about Sid. I want to see Sid, damn it.
Yeah, and the
I mean
airship, and the
and
airship,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah,
But the thing is, like, he was even in the original game, like he was cursing up a storm, and
yeah,
I think he had the most expletives in the entire game. So I can't wait to see, this sailor
yeah.
guy who just goes off on
Which I also,
you know,
seeing how faithfully they adapted,
Barrett.
the
Yeah.
Barrett and the cross. Like they even had Aerith drop a few curse words from time to time. So I
Yeah.
kind of am and with what Tetsuya Nomura wanted to do in creating a Final Fantasy 15 that was very mature and adult oriented. I could also easily foresee a scenario where Sid is every bit as vulgar as
I
he was
imagine.
the
Yeah.
original, and
Yeah, I
I
think so
welcome
too.
that. I think we all would.
Yeah,
I think
so
that would be um, great for everyone. Well, uh, Jeffrey, that is the end of our longest
oh god.
podcast today, man.
We
Um,
went off the rails a little bit. Sorry about
no,
that,
that's
guys.
fine. And just so any of our fans and listeners, the few that we might have right now, a lot of this podcast is very experimental. We're
Yes.
going to be experimenting with how long the podcast goes, but the types of content and news and stuff that we're going to talk about. Hell, especially if we're in the middle of a slow news cycle, Jeffrey and I have the right to go off the rails and talk
Yeah.
about literally whatever the fuck we want to
Anything.
talk
Yeah.
about. So, um, as always, if you enjoyed the banter, like and subscribe.
Mhm.
Jeffrey has a Twitter now.
I do.
You do. So
Um,
let everyone know your Twitter so that they can follow you.
it's at Jeffro Red, so JEFFRORED, and the
It's
same is
underscore red.
no underscore. They
No,
don't
right.
allow
Just okay.
underscores. So it's just Jeffro Red. You can follow me on Facebook too. I mean, if you have a Facebook, most people don't use that stupid shit anymore. But if you got one, it is there. Know that it is my personal account, so I post pictures of myself and stuff. But I do a lot about video games as well. I'm in the midst of writing a horror novel, so if you're a reader and you like horror or anything horror, be sure to follow me for updates on anything regarding that. Um, My YouTube channel is kaput right now until I get some copyright things figured out.
Yeah, for Final Fantasy VII of all
for
things.
Final Fantasy VII. But I wouldn't recommend you even watch that, even if you could, because my opinions have changed since that video.
Yeah.
You heard those opinions today. So hopefully that'll be up and going, and I'll be doing my own thing along with this. But yeah, follow me on social media to keep up with me, and I respond to everything. So
definitely check out my man Jeffrey. Part of the reason why I ended up wanting to do this podcast with you, Jeffrey, is because when it comes to video games, I mean, I value your opinion more than anyone that I know, and we always have these incredible conversations. So I'm like,
yeah,
dude, we might as well put this shit out for people to enjoy and see if they're into it anyway. Also, us being disabled, talking about it from a handicap perspective, it adds a new element and a new flavor.
Agree.
So
yeah,
I'm happy
this
to
is
be
definitely
doing
the
this
highlight of my week. So
awesome, dude.
This is cool. But yeah,
we will continue to do it. You
and
can follow me at Cody Lack, CODYLAC on Twitter. I do the C3 Cat Chronicles podcast tonight. By the way, we'll be doing that on that channel. And again, like and subscribe if you like the content. If you like what me and Jeffrey are trying to do, I too will also be putting out some more podcasts on this channel as well, which in due time will probably have their own YouTube channel. But make sure you hit the thumbs up like a good fan does. Yep. Share it with your friends. Tell us in the comments what you thought about Final Fantasy VII, what you did or didn't enjoy. And until next Friday, my name's Cody Larson. That's Jeffrey Redmond. This is the Cripple Connection Podcast.
Peace and love. Peace and love.